Yeah, so the purpose of tonight's meeting is to help us all prepare for deadline 1, which is next Wednesday, the 12th of May. We're going to spend a bit of time first talking about the open floor hearings, and what we'll do is then take questions, and then later in the meeting, Paul is going to talk about how to encourage the examining authority to look at the right things during their site inspections. But I thought it would just be helpful very briefly to remind everyone of our objectives. So we're trying to gather enough evidence to convince the planning inspectorate that Sizewell C should be refused consent. There's no shortage of ammunition. There are precedents, as we know, with a project in North Wales, for example. And whilst we know the Secretary of State could overrule this recommendation, it would be a massive moral victory. So that's objective number 1. And the second is to send a signal, especially to the Business Secretary and other elected representatives, that there's huge public concern about Sizewell C in Suffolk. I think we've talked about this before, but Kwasi Kwarteng quite recently made it really, really clear that he was looking at how well EDF had done in sort of taking public opinion with it on the Sizewell project. And so the more noise that we can make, the more we can show that there's huge concern about Sizewell C, then that message will go back to him. So, you know, our primary purpose with this evening's session is to encourage as many interested parties as possible to request to speak at the open floor hearings and then to speak. And because that's your opportunity to tell the planning inspectorate really personally what your views are on Sizewell C, you know, things that only you know and only you can express, you know, in a really sort of convincing way. We also would like everyone on this call to make a commitment to do everything they can to encourage other people who are also interested parties, and also your town and parish councils. And it's great to see so many council representatives here who also speak. So I'm going to ask Marianne to speak to us in a minute about the open floor hearings, what it's like, what advice she can give. But I just wanted to say a couple of practical things. They're going to take place online from the 18th to 21st of May inclusive, in other words, in a couple of weeks' time. There are 3 sessions, including evenings, on the first 2 days. That's Tuesday the 18th and Wednesday the 19th of May. There are 2 sessions on Thursday the 20th of May, and the final session is on the morning of Friday the 21st of May. You must apply to speak by the 12th of May, that's next Wednesday. And you must do that via the form that the planning inspectorate has provided. And if you want a bit later, I can share my screen and show you where to find the form, but it's on the planning inspectorate Sizewell C main page. You will be asked for your interested party number. You'll also be asked whether you're speaking on behalf of anyone else. Now, you can find your interested party number in plenty of the emails that the planning inspectorate will have sent you. If you don't know, you can't find it, then drop them an email and they should tell you what that is. There should be about 5 minutes for each speaker. For organisations and anyone speaking on behalf of a number of other people, you might get a bit longer, say up to 15 minutes. And there'd be around 20 people participating in each session. That's the expectation. So when you fill in the form, you'll be able to say which are your top 3 preferred sessions to take part in. And unlike the preliminary meetings, you will be given a very specific time slot. You'll be told you'll be speaking on this day at this time. So you don't need to listen to the whole thing and wait to be called. So on that note, I'm going to ask Marianne to tell us from her experience of taking part in the Scottish Power Renewables DCO, what it's like and what advice she can give us all to prepare.
Just before she does that, just one correction. You will be requested to join the meeting at the beginning of the session, and you will have to stay for that session. Once you've spoken, you'll be able to go. And then if you want to, you can follow it on the live stream. Just thought I'd point that out. You have to join at the beginning. You have to go through the preliminary meeting with them.
Yeah, that's quite right. I do apologise, but you don't have to listen to all the sessions and hope, you know, and think, well, when are they going to call me? Are they going to call me? Thanks, Paul. Thanks for that. Marianne, I'm going to find and spotlight your video.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alison, Paul, thank you for the opportunity to just talk about the open floor hearings and what we've learned through doing this with Scottish Power Renewables Development Consent Order. So the open floor hearings, I think, are a very important part of the development consent order because they come quite early in the process and they can actually set the scene. You can really let the inspectorate team know the weight or the strength of feeling if you speak very passionately about what impacts on you. It's not a complete open mic though, although it's called an open floor hearing, you can't just talk about anything. And the principle of nuclear is definitely off the table. So don't waste your time in preparing for that. However, you can raise topics under things like overall need for nuclear power or site here in this area. But my suggestion is that we use these open floor hearings to speak very personally, as Alison said, about things that are important to you. You'll know without me saying that in 5 minutes, it's a very short period of time, especially if you get a bit nervous, which I did every day I was on the hearings. I would suggest you make notes and you practice reading out loud to someone else who can tell you where the sort of clunky bits are, perhaps. But also, I'd suggest that you make more notes than you actually need. And if possible, you don't have to, but if you can listen to the preceding speakers at any time during the other few days via the live link, so you can be doing something else and just have it on in the background. If something has been really said over and over, you might want to not say that, because the way to impact the planning inspectorate team is to say things that are relevant and in a way that hasn't been said before. If you use the same phrases, they will start to get a bit frustrated and they may even ask you to stop speaking, and we don't want that. We want to use our time. Even if you don't end up speaking, if you change your mind, or if someone else has said what you want to say and you just say, I echo everything they've said, the most important thing now, before the 12th of May, is first of all to register as an interested party if you're not already. And then secondly, request to speak at the open floor hearings, even if you don't end up doing, because that's how we demonstrate how important it is to people, is by getting the numbers to apply. If you have a specific matter, or you have technical information, say on a specific hearing like noise, you can also ask by the 12th of May to speak on the issue specific hearings. And for any of my town council and parish council colleagues, I would suggest that you ask to speak on all the issue specific hearings now, because you can always back out later on, sorry, but you can't add your request. So we've got to get in now everything we want to speak about. So just blanket it, just say you want to speak about all the issue specific hearings. And then we can talk about it, we can find out more information, and we can make a judgment accordingly nearer the time. So make it meaningful, make it personal to you. Don't feel you have to talk about everything. Use your time wisely, listen to other people if you can, and select what you think would be most impactful. Don't worry if they don't say anything after you've spoken. Doesn't mean you haven't impacted them. They're not allowed to react, okay? So they might say something bizarre or benign, like, that was very interesting, or, okay, thank you. Now, they may ask you a supplementary question. If you don't know the answer, you can always say, can I send that in writing, okay? The applicant, very, very unlikely, I've not seen this happen, the applicant doesn't ask you questions. You're not going to be cross-examined by EDF. But the planning inspectorate might ask you to clarify something or tell them more about something. Okay, so be prepared for that. As I say, if you don't know, just say, I don't know, I'll come back to you. This planning inspectorate team has asked that we also send in writing what we've said verbally. Now, don't worry, if you deviate off your script, you can always watch it. Horror, I hated doing that, but I did sometimes. You can always watch it back the next day when it's put onto the website and take notes. So if you deviate, you'll have a record of what you said. As Paul said, you do have to sign in at the beginning of each block, not the whole day, but there might be 2 sessions in the morning, 2 sessions in the afternoon. And so they'll have you join with a group of people. They'll go through all the plenaries, tell you how it's going to work. When the inspectorate calls you at your time, they just ask you to unmute. You don't have to have your camera on. You can have your camera on if you want. And then you start speaking for your time. They will flash up like a PowerPoint that says you've got 1 minute to go. So just bear that in mind. And then at the end, they'll ask you to stop if you overrun. So again, if you think there's any chance you're going to overrun, say something, everything you want to say briefly. If you've got any more time, then you can pad it out with other things you want to say towards the end. Okay, so have confidence. It's an open floor hearing. It's your time to make a difference and to say what you want to say. For town and parish councils or anyone with technical information, again, ask to speak at the issue specific hearings. Okay, and if anyone wants to speak to me offline another time through Alison, then do get in touch. I'm more than willing to help in any way I can. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. I'm just going, before we go to questions, I'm just going to share something Michael Marnie has just messaged me, because I asked him if there were any kind of pearls of wisdom that he wanted to share as well. Much of what he said sort of really echoes Marianne. You know, so I mean, try and be specific as possible about your reasons for concerns, rather than just sort of general comments about how terrible you think it's going to be. You know, endorsing previous speakers, trying not to repeat what they've said as much as possible. But obviously, you know, if you're making very personal representations, then you're not duplicating anybody, because nobody else has got that personal experience or personal thing to say. He also said that he felt that displays of genuine emotion could be quite powerful. There were a few examples at Friston of people being very close to breaking down, and he felt that that brought home far better than words how these projects will damage people's lives for a long time. I mean, obviously, you know, the key word there is sort of genuine. And I think many of us that took part in the preliminary hearings will remember Emma Dowley speaking about how they'd found EDF on their land, you know, without any sort of notice previously. And the emotion in her voice, I think, had a huge impact on all of us. So I don't think there's a great deal I want to add to Marianne, what she said. I mean, I think she's covered it really well. You know, as I say, the primary objective is to encourage as many people as possible to speak. But if you really feel you can't, then you should nominate someone to speak on your behalf. So that can be, I'm pretty sure it can be somebody who isn't an interested party, and Marianne's nodding, so that's good. If you want it to be Stop Sizewell C, then by all means, but I think the real power here is that there are as many individual voices as possible. You know, we definitely got brownie points in the preliminary meetings for speaking on behalf of lots of people, but this is different. This is your opportunity to have your very personal say.
Sorry, can I also add that you can also mention that you think things that are missing or things that have not been addressed. So as well as concerns or, you know, things that you're not happy with or uncomfortable with, you can also talk about things that you want the inspectorate to look at or to consider. So as long as you don't talk about the principle of matters and you talk specifically about examples and make it relevant to you, they'll let you speak.
Great, thanks, Marianne. I'm going to start taking questions, and there's a couple of people with their hands up. Firstly, Chris.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, it's just a quick one. I came in a bit late, but I heard Marianne talking about applying for the issue-specific hearings, which basically, when you read the Rule 8 letter, it basically implies that you should apply for those now. But when I spoke to Michelle Gregory about that, she said, no, don't apply for the issue-specific hearings now, just do the open floor hearings. So I think that just needs to be clarified, because she definitely told me not to do that. She said that the issue-specific hearings, they will call once they've decided which issues that they'll be talking about or discussing, then they will put a notice out and ask people to let them know. And what she told me was they probably won't do a form like they're doing with the open floor hearings. They'll just ask for an email. But because there seems to be conflicting messages about that, I think it certainly needs clarifying. But I just wanted people to be aware that if you tried to apply for an issue-specific hearing in general, they may not acknowledge it at the moment.
I think we should say, though, Parish and Town Council should say that they intend to speak now at the issue-specific hearings. It's not good enough for them to say that once they know what the subjects are, they'll contact who they think should speak, because it's what they've done with the questions. It's really bizarre. There was no rationale. They just sent these thousands of questions out and picked certain people they thought should answer it. You know, we know what we need to tell them. And so I'm sorry, I will challenge that if they don't let town and parish councils speak on issue-specific hearings. Now, of course, they don't want all 56 of us speaking on noise, and we should be intelligent enough and supportive enough of each other to sort out who should speak. But I would suggest now, blanket email say, we as a town council reserve the right to speak at the issue-specific hearings. Then later on, we can challenge that as it comes through. Okay, that's my advice.
Thank you.
I'd agree with that, Marianne, definitely.
And I mean, sorry.
There's no reason why you shouldn't say you want to speak at all the issue-specific hearings, even though we don't know which ones are which and when they're going to be yet, which actually is a disappointment. They should really have got that down to us at the moment. So yes, say all of them. And then when they do ask, you can say whether you do or you don't.
It does indeed say notification of wish to make oral representations at an issue-specific hearing under deadline 1. But then it confusingly says all notifications of a wish to attend or speak at an examination event must be submitted separately from other correspondence. So, I mean, I think Marianne's right. I think, you know, we should be saying we reserve the right to speak at all issue-specific hearings and then deal with them on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to go to Richard Cooper now.
Thanks, Alison. Hold on, let me put my hand down. Can I just endorse what Marianne has said about sending in written submissions of what you say in the open floor hearings? I think it's really important that if you've got some impactful comments to make in the open floor hearings, that they go into writing. And those have got to be in by the 2nd of June, deadline 2. And the other point to make is that the examining authority have said if you spoken representations and written representations carry equal weight. So if you really feel that you don't want to speak, then do please write in with your comments by 2nd of June. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you. I have a written question here from Nigel Brown to everyone saying, do you have to nominate your speaker for the parish before the 12th deadline, or can you say an unnamed representative? I was just looking at the form again.
Yeah, you can say a member or members of the town council. And in fact, although at Aldborough we've had 4 people still researching materials, I've primarily been the speaker, but we didn't have to do it that way. You can have different people on a town council representing you. So it's the organisation, but you do have to nominate an email, and you might want to make that the town clerk, or you might want to make not the town clerk. Just make sure that you get the notification. So pick an email address that's going to, you know, be looked at every day.
Thank you. I do apologise, I don't know your name. SJB, who's that?
It's Stephanie Bunn.
Oh, hello, Stephanie. Hi, sorry.
I just wanted to ask how we get this IP number, because I've tried to fill in the form, but I didn't know how to get an IP number.
Well, I think the question is, did you register as an interested party at the end of September last year?
No.
It may be that that will prevent you from taking part in the open floor hearings, I'm afraid. You could contact the planning inspectorate and explain your circumstances and see if there's any latitude, because now that EDF's new proposals have been accepted, they have opened up the period for people who are affected by these revised proposals to register as an interested party. And if there's any question that might apply to you, then it's possible that the planning inspectorate will look favourably on your request. But if you didn't register in September, then you won't have an interested party number, unfortunately. I know there's at least one other person on this call who's in that same situation, but they have been sending in written submissions, and the planning inspectorate has published those submissions. So if they won't let you speak, you could write down what you would have wanted to say, and it may be they'll use their discretion to publish it. Okay. Marianne, do you want to say more?
Yeah, I've just tried to be clever and type it in the chat. I'm not very good online, but yeah, I would send an email now, as Alison said. I would say that you were not aware in the earlier days because of the poor consultation and the lack of information that's come to you. A lot of people don't know about it, and it's not our fault. We don't know what we don't know. So I'd say, you weren't aware of it. You want to speak now. You are impacted by the application. If they then turn around and say, no, you can't, then that's when you'll just have to ask someone else to speak on your behalf who is an interested party. So another parish council or another group or an individual. Thank you.
I've got a hand up from Fran and Bill. I don't know whether it's which one of you or both of you have a question.
It's both of us. Well, it's just quickly. Does your written submission have to be just what you said, or can you put additional information in that you didn't have time to say in the 5 minutes? And is there a limit on the size? Obviously within reason. I'm not talking about writing an essay.
You can send in additional information when you submit it on the 2nd of June, absolutely. And I think they're asking for people who wrote huge relevant representations to summarise them. I don't think that will apply in this case.
Okay.
Can I also add that you can also comment on what other people have said too? So not only send in your representation at what you said verbally, but you can also add comments on what you've heard others raise. And that's especially important if the applicant at the end, because, sorry, I should have said at the end of each session or day, 2 or 3 times a day, the planning inspectorate will go to EDF as the applicant, say, do you want to say anything in response? Now, again, it can be a bit frustrating because they will try to sometimes put spin on things or answer and turn around what you've said. But again, just take notes. And then when you send in your written representation, you can put again at the bottom or send a document in support of what you said. So just do what you can with what you're given, and then add anything else you need to put in.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
I think
sorry, Paul.
Just need to remember that the open floor hearing of what you say verbally, they're asking for a transcript of that effectively. So keep that to that, then put everything else you want to put into your written representation. That's the big thing that really needs to go in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got 2 quick questions. One is the open floor hearings, are they ordered in any way, or is it very random who speaks about what, and then the next one can be completely different or exactly the same?
That's my understanding. I mean, we're allowed to nominate our favoured sessions, so I don't see how they can group people. I mean, they do want in the form, they do want you to give a very brief idea of the points you want to raise, but I don't think they can really order it.
I think in the Scottish Power ones, they tended to have a few organisations at the beginning, parish councils, NGOs talking. Then they'd have a session, a set of people who are individuals, and they did that all throughout. And when you look, there's a set of open floor hearings right at the end of this process as well. It's not just right at the beginning. There's another set there. So people who didn't get a chance to actually say anything in the first three in this first set will be in that lot. And so you won't get it, there won't be a second chance for anybody to do it. That's where it'll happen.
Okay, and the other question I've got is I'm parish council, co-business owner, and also my own representation. There's effectively
3.
hearing 3 times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do that. Split yourself within different days though. Pick different 3 top 3s, or they might put you all into one. So my suggestion is, because you'll get longer for the parish council, the organisation may get, you know, a bit longer depending on the size of the organisation, and then you as an individual. Yeah, and make it clear you're raising different things under different headings.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you.
Cool. I've got Josie from Walberswick, and then I've got a question from Robin from Woodbridge in writing.
Right. Thank you, Alison. I assume you can hear me?
We can.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to, I don't know if this comes up at the hearing or this is just something we swallow. What I'm just finding so difficult is that EDF introduced in this second round, you know, basically a suite of options, and we don't know what option they've chosen, right? So we had the consultation, we all wrote about it, we never got a response to it, and then we've never seen EDF's proposals. And as you said, the planning inspector says they accepted it, but I still don't know what they've accepted. And therefore it makes it really difficult to respond to what it is that we're meant to be doing. I just can't get my head around this, because it's like somebody's put in for a building that they're going to put up, and they've not even said where the building is going to be or how high it's going to be or how many windows are in it. And so I'm really in a bit of a state on this, because I don't know what to say because of their new proposals.
Josie, it's Paul. Do you
Thank you, Paul.
Do you get my spreadsheet that actually shows you where all the documents are and what they are? No, you're looking puzzled, so you probably...
I'm looking very puzzled. Exactly.
Okay. There are a suite of about, I don't know, 20 or so documents which contain all of the changes that they've requested, and they're pointed out in a spreadsheet which is online, which you can go and look at, and I can point you towards them. So there are 14 changes or thereabouts in total, but they are all there. I mean, some have less information than we would like, so we're still trying to push it, but the documentation is there. What I'll do, Josie, is send you access to that so you can see it. I'll put you on my list so that you get any future updates to that. It's always in the same place. I change it every couple of weeks.
Thank you.
New documents around. So that's your best bet, and go and take a look. Okay.
Okay.
Can I just say, it is difficult. You do have to read some documents or look at some documents, but that's why we said we wanted perhaps town and parish councils or groups of people to work together, because it is so difficult to tackle, 3,000 documents. So if we can do anything to support each other on topics that are of common interest. But Paul and Alison are a huge benefit to all of us, and they've done a terrific job in summarising the issues as over the last 3 years. So if you look back on their website, there's a terrific amount of information that will help you there. But the other thing I'd say is perhaps, 2 things. You can always listen to the open floor hearings of the Scottish Power Renewables, and that will give you an idea of the style of things. But just read some of the latest documents from EDF on the library, or read other people's relevant representations so you can see what sort of things people talk about. But I'm sure Paul can give you the top issues that you can then read through and see what you want to speak about. Thanks, Josie.
I'd add to that, we're a bit slammed at the moment, but I'm hoping by the end of this week that we'll be able to update our initial leaflet, which was just a summary in 4 sides of the kind of key elements of the proposals. So I was just digging into the transport proposals today and finding that buses have gone up, and lorries might be down a bit, but not down as much as they said. And there's a few things kind of in there that we haven't necessarily publicized as much as we should have done, just through sheer being overwhelmed by the information. But we will do our best to get that out. But it shouldn't stop you applying to speak, and hopefully it will be enough time to help people prepare the remarks that they want to make.
But Alison and Paul, then on this subject, is it a legitimate statement to make to the planning inspectorate that the failure of EDF to be straight on what it is asking to do, and their constant chopping and changing, has made it extraordinarily difficult for normal, ordinary people? As a parish representative, I feel that that's sort of my point, is that people are finding it almost impossible to engage because it's just so complicated, and EDF has been less than transparent. Let's put it that way. Is that a legitimate point to make to them, or they don't care about that? They want to know much more specifically about, the coastal erosion concerns, or, the bird sanctuary and things like that. That's kind of an advice question. I'm just wondering.
I think so. I think the planning inspectorate need to know all the reasons that we're aggrieved about this project. I mean, I spoke to someone whose land is affected the other day, and and they told EDF that they could almost cope with some of the impacts that they're going to have if EDF had played it straight. But it's that sort of information that each individual will have very personal experience of, which is so valuable for them to know.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a few written questions. I'm going to say to Robin, do you want to ask yours, or shall I just read it out?
I'll ask it if you want. My specific is with regard to deadline 1, Alison, is obviously we had all these additional documents, particularly in January, February, a lot on the rail noise, a lot of stuff like that. Do we, from my understanding of deadline 1, we need to put some representation in on those additional documents by deadline 1, or have I got that wrong?
Marianne, I'll pass to you, but I think just save it for deadline 2 is my advice. Marianne, do you want to reply?
No, I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure, Robin, it's deadline 2 for those.
Oh, that would be excellent, because I've been tied up with the election and I really want to get the technical report I'm doing on noise completed, and the 12th of May would have been very tight. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, it just seems ludicrous to have deadlines like that so close together and to duplicate that work. Your written representations are, that's what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time at our next meeting. That's the kind of real substance, and so that's where all of that information should be put. Nigel Brown is saying examining authorities identified some written questions generically to parish councils. Again, I think we're aim to talk a little bit more about the written questions at our next Zoom. But we've spoken to the AONB partnership about these issues of landscape and design. So we're going to hope to get some guidance from them that we can then share with all the parish councils, because that deadline is the 2nd of June. So we have got a wee bit more time. Is that all right, Nigel? And Anne is agreeing. Paul, do you want to ask your question? Paul Tilcott, do you want to ask your question? And then I'll go to Anne.
I would put my hand up, but I can't find the button anywhere, so sorry about that. Yes, obviously after going through the PINS meeting with you all, I was amazed at how many questions that the inspectors asked. Is that good for us? Have they been listening? Although they give no reaction, do they, at the time, of course, but is that a good sign? I just wondered what you thought. Thank you.
I think we think it is a good sign. I think we think it's very interesting. Each examining authority obviously has its own style, and you know, there seems to be a very heavy emphasis from this examining authority of wanting everything in writing in triplicate, you know, which is a bit onerous, but they've clearly read everything. And you know, the fact that they've come up with so many questions, mostly thankfully directed to EDF, is good. Anne, I'm going to go to you.
Oh, yes, thanks, Alison. Yeah, we have seen all the questions that have been asked of EDF in relation to, I think there's some for Hatchiston, some Milesford, some Wickham. One of those came to me because Landscape Design Associates wanted to discuss an additional viewpoints for the Southern Park and Ride site. So I guess we just wait till we hear what EDF come up with in response to those questions. But we're also picking up on them in relation to traffic issues through Wickham Market with the Parish Council. But the other question, you mentioned the AONB unit. Do you know if they are putting forward a robust case in terms of landscape impacts on the AONB from the station? Because I know that Suffolk Preservation Society have pulled out, in a sense. They've said they just haven't got the capacity to deal with EDF.
Yes.
So, yeah, so you mentioned the AONB unit. Do you think they're going to be quite robust in terms of all their evidence on sort of cumulative impacts as well, with the substations that have already been built and, you know, all the things that you and I have talked about on and off over the last year or two?
I don't know how broad they can be, but their assertion is that the project compromises the purpose of the AONB, and that's what they will pursue. David Wood, who is the chair, is not standing for re-election, so there will be a new chair of the AONB partnership after this election. I'm sure we all wish David very well indeed, and he's done a sterling job. Right, I've got a question from John, and then I would like to move on to talk about site inspections, unless anybody else has.
Thank you, Alison. A mention was being made there of the questions that we are being asked by PINS, and Yoxford Parish Council is one of those that's been asked a question. However, it's a very strange question because it refers to the capacity of the accommodation build. And I don't quite understand why we've been asked that question. Has anybody got any idea?
The short answer is no. There must be something in your relevant representation that gave them to believe that you don't think the campus is big enough, or you think it's too big. But your deadline is the 2nd of June, so it's a little bit later on.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I'll have a look at your relevant representation and see if we can work out why. But yes,
Okay, thanks very much.
One of the few parish councils that was asked a very specific question.
Well, you know, there are other things we could have been asked about, like the roundabout.
Well, you know, Stop Sizewell C and Task were only asked about, you know, whether we thought a design champion would save the day. I mean, you know, really curious. Anyway, there we go. We'll talk about written questions a bit more next time. Paul, I'm going to pass to you to talk about site inspections, because that's the other thing that Planning Inspectorate want responses by deadline 1.
Yeah, so we are being asked to do 2 things. Well, there are sort of 2 things we need to do. We're being asked to comment on EDF's proposal for the next set of accompanied and unaccompanied site inspections. The first thing you should probably do when you want to look at this, there are 2 documents on the Planning Inspectorate website about the site inspections, the unaccompanied site inspections they did last August and in February this year. So if you can see in there what it is they've been doing, where they've been going, but what they've mainly been looking at is the landscape and visual impact of the site once built. Because in the first set of documents, there's a lot of little maps with sort of viewpoints of where they stood and what they were looking at. And they're always looking towards the Sizewell site. That's the only thing they're doing. So they go to Southwold and they look down the coast at Sizewell. They go to Thorpe Nest and they look up the coast to Sizewell, etc., etc. So there's a lot of other things that they should probably be looking at beyond that, such as at Thorpe Nest, they should probably go and look at the coastal defences that are failing, which are only 10 years old, although they're supposed to actually last for 20 years. So there are a whole bunch of things like that, which we need to persuade the inspectorate to look at. Now, in the document that has EDF's suggestions about site inspections, against each one, because all of the other site inspections were unaccompanied, they're now suggesting that they would be good to go back to some of these places, but with accompaniment from people from EDF, as well as, if we think we should be sending somebody along to some of those inspections, which we do, we should also be suggesting what they should look at. I mean, because that's part of what this is about. It's about familiarizing the planning inspectors with the area and the issues that they're liable to see and are liable to impact this development. So, for instance, one of the suggestions EDF has is them walking along the Sizewell frontage up to the tank traps and a little bit beyond it, and talking about the various things they should look at. And there are places in the little maps as to where they will stand and say, at this point, you should look at this. But there are things that they don't tell them they should look at from that point, that perspective. So we need to make sure that they are looking at the right things in what EDF is telling them to do. And for instance, there's an RSPB Minsmere visit, but that will be totally organized by the RSPB, and that's what EDF say. But there may be other places that you think they should go, which are not in their list. I mean, their list at the moment is going to Minsmere, RSP Minsmere. There are several main development site visits, some of which are actually on the site next to Sizewell B, the temporary construction area. There is, as I said, the Sizewell Beach to the tank traps. They're going up to look at places like the Leyston Industrial Estate, Oldhurst Farm, Kenton Hills, the Green Rail route. They want them to look at the Sizewell Link Road, so they're going to drive up and go up Moat Road and go up Pretty Road and all of Fordley Road and all of those and show where this thing is actually going to be. And they've done the Oxford Roundabout, the park and rides and everything else. But against each of those, there's a certain amount of things that they should be looking at. So number one, we need to suggest things they should be looking at during that set of visits, because they will go ahead. But also, if there are other places we don't think that they've looked at or they should be going to visit, and that could be something that is much closer to where you are, which is not included on that set of suggestions, then you should say to the inspectorate, we think you should go to this place. You should go to Aldborough and look at Slawden and the Martello Tower and the damage to the defences that are going on there, for instance. So there's a lot of things we can do to actually push that and make sure that the planning inspectorate go and look at the right things. So I would encourage you to take a look at that and make whatever comments you can. And that has to be done by the 12th of May. So that's pretty urgent right now. And certainly for the parish councils, it's certainly worth looking at. I don't think they're going to Snape, for instance, even though, who knows, you can't actually see Sizewell from there, but it's not just landscape and visual impact. It's all about, you know, what these junctions are like on some of the roads, etc., etc. So think about what it is you want these people to go and look at.
All the junctions out of London, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, one of they've also suggested some more unaccompanied site inspections, some of which are to go all the way down the A12. All of the places they're going to do little changes to junctions and everything else and look at all of those. So there's a whole bunch of things that they've got in there. It's a single document. You can go and look at it. It's pretty easy to read, but it gives bullets for all of the things to look at the various places. And at the end, there are maps and where all of these reference points are. So you can actually see what it is they're suggesting.
There's a link on our website. If you're on our website, stopsizewellc.org, you'll see in the top menu, one of the things is take part in the planning process. And that's got a couple of brief paragraphs about deadline 1, including a link to EDF suggestions. And those of you in the preliminary meetings or that have read the Rule 8 letter will see that they are arranging to go to Hinkley Point on the 22nd of June. Task and ourselves have been in touch with people down there for suggestions of things that they should go and look at. And in fact, we had an email from EDF this morning, didn't we, Paul, asking about that. So do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, so EDF have sent me an email asking whether there are particular things that I think that the inspectors should visit whilst they're at Hinkley Point. I mean, we are certainly going to suggest they visit some of the villages close by, Stoddersea and Churton. And there are some parish councillors there who we may see if we can persuade to join in that visit, so that they have a viewpoint and they can show them how big the spoil heaps are, which have gone from 35 metres and they've now allowed them to make them 45 metres high. So for anybody who wants to go and see a large spoil heap, Hinkley Point's your place. So yes, we need to figure that out by next Wednesday and respond to Carly Vince. So.
And it's not clear whether there's any suggestion that one of us should go to, but we will certainly ask.
Can you? Oh,
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul. Can you add the bat corridor, please, to the Hinkley Point C visit? Because I've read a document that it was actually specially designed by one of the subcontractors. It is actually a thing, you know.
Yes, I've seen it.
You've seen it. Good.
I've seen it. It's near the bat house. Well, but the other thing about this is they put lots of those bat corridors on the Norwich bypass. I don't know whether you know that, and they've figured out that they don't actually work. But that's an aside.
Sorry.
Nigel's asking if we can ask them to look at the noisy level crossings in Melton and Woodbridge where the night trains will pass. Absolutely, that's exactly the sort of thing. Sadly, there won't be any night trains unless, are there any goods vehicles that go through?
Well, one of the interesting things is that they are going to visit some places at dusk and dark. So I think they're also going to start looking at, you know, that sort of side of it. These next set of things are supposed to look at noise and various other aspects of this build, which they haven't done in their previous visits. So if you wanted them to go and look at the Sizewell C site or from somewhere at night, you know, that might be a good idea. And certainly when we go to Hinkley Point, I think one of the things we should definitely suggest is they come and look at the night glow, because it is quite astonishing. Well, it was when I went there, and there are a heck of a lot more cranes now.
And I know, you know, there are people who, you know, live on the route of the Sizewell Link Road or very close to where that'll start. Paul, I'm looking at you, for example. You know, if you live on or near the A12, you know, you may just want to invite them to come round to your place and see what the traffic is like, because, you know, they need your permission to do that. So invite them. Any questions about site inspections? No.
Can I just ask, you know, from Great Beatings, I'm not speaking for the parish, but we've been excluded because we're in the outer zone of the two specified zones. And I raised that at one of the, you know, the Zoom meetings with the inspectors, and mentioned also that the freight management facility, I think, is outside any zone. But you know, a lot of the traffic impact will actually be in those secondary zones. So, I just wondered, the contact with the parishes seems to be very, very selective.
So is your parish, Regan, an interested party? Have they declared?
Oh yes, we were consulted some time back, but then we were dropped off for a second consultation. And we protested and they just said, you're not in the zone, you know, and that was it.
This is EDF dropping you rather than the planning inspectorate dropping you.
Yeah, not the planning inspectors. I mean, I raised it quite deliberately. You know, said that there are, I mean, for example, Coddingham, I've talked to people in the village, you know, just by chance passing through. But I mean, they were talked to a long time ago by EDF, and they seem to be quite content with the lorry routing that exists at the moment. But, you know, that was only one or two people. There may be other people there. And it's notorious for anybody who uses Coddingham, you know, to get over to the A14. You know, that is actually a very, very complex and dangerous place. And it relates to the whole question, which I've raised a number of times, about what the return journeys for the HGVs and other traffic is actually going to be, because they only ever talk about, you know, the A12 and the park and ride and the number of HGVs going from the south and the north. But I gather from local politics, which I don't want to get into, but there are, you know, transport contractors in Suffolk who won't want their lorry drivers, you know, delivering the load and then going south to check in at the freight management facility and then go all the way back up somewhere else like Bury St Edmunds. Like, you know, there are a lot of issues like that, which they are, you know, they're hiding, they're disguising in terms of traffic impact.
Charles, you want to reply? You're on mute, Charles.
Sorry, Ali, I thought you could unmute me.
I can't. I can only ask you to unmute.
That power is denied you. I can't answer Reagan's specific point, but unfortunately, though I think it would be worth him trying to get in as an interested party, even at the last minute, if he's not already there, if you can find a loophole. My point was that in Paul's very helpful list of inspections, we also ought to consider the existing B1122, because of course we have at least 2 years of what EDF like to call early years, which makes it sound like a nursery, not a mayhem, of traffic, 600 trucks a day, making its way down the current B1122 through Middleton Moor and through Theberton. So looking at that, looking at Theberton Church, looking at some of the many dangerous junctions along the route, definitely one that I will try and raise.
Yeah, and it's sort of bizarre, Charles, because actually Scottish Power have made some suggestions about the B1122 based on the cumulative impact, and yet EDF seem to be in total denial. It's quite astonishing, especially as they are the impact, not Scottish Power.
Yeah.
Marianne.
Do you know where I can find those, Paul?
I do.
Oh, thank you. We'll speak later.
Marianne.
Yeah, so in terms of traffic, I did want to clarify, as far my understanding is, although HGVs will have timed slots to go to site, to the gate from the park and rides or from elsewhere, there's no timed departures. So that's not managed. And remember, it's only HGVs, LGVs and, you know, other deliveries and worker vehicles in the area won't be managed, although they say they will tell them there's certain routes that they shouldn't take. The other thing to bear in mind is that there could be queuing on the approaches to the park and rides at certain, so if they said you can come to the park and ride from 9 AM and you'll be going to site from 10, they may park overnight the night before just on the side of the road. So there'll be a lot of fly parking potentially if that's not their slot to go. So yeah, EDF say they're going to be managing things, but there's a lot around the periphery that is of concern, that's more open to problems. And certainly when we've had speakers from Hinkley Point C come, they've spoken about the problems with that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got suggestions from Anne Mitchum that they drive along the A12 to see how journeys are impacted by a cyclist or a tractor. Klaus is saying, you know, rail issues affect several parishes and we'd want to give them greater traction. So I think as far as possible, the parish councils on the railway route, it would be great to see you guys working together on that.
Yeah, just a point on that. There is one of the suggestions of the unidentified site inspections is the East Suffolk line, and they have it going down to every single one of the stations and the villages that are on that line, Campsie Ash, the whole works. So you perhaps want to look at that and actually suggest that they become accompanied site inspections and not do them unaccompanied. So that would be a good point to actually bring up.
Thank you. Any more questions on site inspections? If not, I was just going to quickly screen share and show you where to find the form for applying to speak at the open floor hearings. But bear in mind that your comments on site inspections should be sent in separately. Sorry, it's all a bit slow. So this, you can see, hopefully, is just the Planning Inspectorate main Sizewell C project page, and right at the top there's the open floor hearing participation form. So if I click on that, it will open shortly. I have already got it to open. It was appalling, really, that it didn't work when they first sent the message out. They said, oh, it took a couple of days to load. So you can see they're asking for your name, an email address. I'm going to have to look at this one that I've already partly filled in so that you can see, confirm your email address and a phone number. Say whether you're representing yourself or whether you're a friend or family member acting for someone else, and how you want to participate. Actually, so they're not asking for your interested party number, and then selecting up to 3 options for attendance at the open floor hearings, and you can see Tuesday morning, afternoon, evening, Wednesday morning, afternoon, evening, Thursday morning or afternoon, or Friday morning. I think what we'll probably do is we'll talk to task and, you know, see if we can kind of coordinate. So maybe, you know, one of us speaks on the first session of the open floor hearings, and, you know, one of us tries to speak on the last session, so that we can kind of set the tone and kind of wrap up, kind of summarize what's gone before. So we'll just try and do that. But, you know, for everybody else, you know, hopefully there are enough options there that should mean that you're available to speak at some point. And as I say, if you know other interested parties who are not on this call, do encourage them. I mean, I'm talking to kind of businesses that I know have registered, because I think it's really important that they speak, and, you know, as many individuals as possible we would like to see take part. And, you know, as we've said, you can nominate someone else to speak on your behalf. That's preferable. You know, the last resort should be nominating Stop Sizewell C to speak on your behalf, but it's best to do that than to not respond to the form at all. Marianne.
So I was just going to say that there are separate hearings for compulsory acquisition as well. So if you're a person whose land has to be purchased or is in discussion with EDF about your land being used, there's separate hearings for that. But you can mention it during the open floor hearing, but don't go on don't give personal information at that hearing. That's supposed to be about the, you know, the actual compulsory acquisition purchase itself.
That's great. Unless there are any last questions or comments, I'm going to suggest that we stop the meeting. So I'll stop recording. I'm happy to hang around, you know, if people want to go, but anybody else has got a question, I'll hang around for a bit in the call. And again, great to see so many town and parish councils. I know some of you have had to go, but we'll look forward to hearing more from you.